Thank you all very much for joining us. We are very honored to have Emily Broder, the Associate Director, Jewish Outreach and Partnerships, with us tonight. She will be sharing with us what ADL is doing in this field of combating anti-Semitism. She leads efforts to foster meaningful relationships with ADL's congregational engagement program called Kolanu and other Jewish organizations. She is dedicated to strengthening ties within the Jewish community in support of ADL's mission. Sorry, everyone, I'm coughing a bit. Combating anti-Semitism. You should all know that FJMC, together with Women's League and United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, are partners with ADL. We established this back in 2021 with Dan Granick of blessed memory when he had done this. So we are part of the ADL large family of partners, together with our fellow conservative organizations. And we appreciate very much, Emily, that we are able to do this. At the convention in July 3rd to 5th in Chicago, I hope all of you who are on this call will be able to join us. We will have 3 workshop sessions on combating anti-Semitism. ADL will be there on teaching us Advocacy 101. How do we do this? How are we to be effective? Stand With Us will be there, and they will be giving us interpretations on Gen Z, how anti-Semitism impacts Gen Z. Very important topic. We've done some of these at some retreats, such as the Seaboard Retreat. And we'll also have a presentation by the Spurtis Institute, which is Chicago-based, on their programs to certify Jewish lay and professional leaders to combat anti-Semitism. So I hope that if all of you like what we've heard, what we'll be hearing tonight, that you will be able to join us in Chicago for a lot of fun and a lot of learning. Emily will talk us a little bit more about this program in her presentation. So let me ask you to start us off, and please, can you give us a picture of ADL today, what your goals are, what your accomplishments are? I have more questions afterward, but leave it to you how much you would like to answer. And for everyone else who would like to ask a question, please put that into the chat and I will read it to our guest.
Well,
Emily.
thank you, Irv, for having me here. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight. And I will say before I jump in that Irv's not the only one coughing tonight, so please excuse me in advance for the voice and for the coughing. But it's really my pleasure and my honor to be here with you tonight. And I want to thank all of you for joining me. I really applaud everything that you're doing to fight anti-Semitism in your communities. So I committed to doing this work, fighting anti-Semitism, day in and day out, really, when I joined ADL about 3 years ago. But ADL as an organization has been doing this work for well over 100 years. So we were founded in 1913 in response to rising anti-Semitism at the time. And it was our clear understanding that the fight against one form of prejudice cannot succeed without battling prejudice in all forms. So we at ADL have stood steadfast in our mission since 1913, and that mission is to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. So today, ADL has roughly 25 regional offices across the US, as well as offices in Israel, Europe, and Latin America. I personally had the privilege to work in the Michigan regional office when I joined ADL in 2022. Our regional offices work on the ground in local communities. We respond to anti-Semitic incidents and other bias incidents. We work with schools and synagogues, with law enforcement, elected leaders, and many other groups. So our regional offices work really closely with ADL's 4 national centers: our Center on Extremism, Center for Technology and Society, Center on Anti-Semitism Research, and Center for Combating Anti-Semitism in Education, which is our newest center. So I'll tell you just a little bit about each one. Center on Extremism, or COE, tracks extremist trends, ideologies, and groups across the ideological spectrum. COE includes a staff of investigators and analysts, researchers, and technical experts who strategically monitor, expose, and disrupt extremist threats. Our next center is Center on Technology and Society, or CTS, and that's a research-driven advocacy center that works to end the proliferation of anti-Semitism and all forms of hate and harassment online. So our team at CTS partners with industry, with civil society, government, and targeted communities to expose harms online and to hold tech companies accountable and fight for just and equitable spaces online. And then we also have our Center for Anti-Semitism Research, or CAR, C-A-R. CAR seeks to answer the questions foundational to understanding, preventing, and reducing anti-Semitism. They've done work to help us understand where anti-Semitic attitudes are most prevalent and what type of approach will be most impactful when addressing anti-Semitism. And then our newest center is the Ronald Birnbaum Center to Combat Anti-Semitism in Education, or CCAE, and they drive coordinated advocacy to address rising anti-Semitism in K-12 schools and colleges and universities. So some of you may have heard about our campus anti-Semitism report card, and that's a CCAE product. When it initially came out about a year ago, the first report card iteration, people were really dismayed to see some terrible grades, including both of the major state schools in Michigan. And I'm based in Michigan, as I mentioned. So, we were shocked. Well, we weren't shocked, truthfully, at the time, but I'm really pleased to report that so many of the universities that had failing grades roughly a year ago have really leaned into working with ADL to improve the ways that they're responding to anti-Semitic incidents. And we're getting ready to release our next iteration of the report card, where many of those grades will be changed. So, as I mentioned a minute ago, when I started working for ADL, I worked in our Michigan regional office, and a large part of my work there was responding to local anti-Semitic and bias incidents. I've since moved into my current role in Jewish Outreach and Partnerships, and that's part of our National Affairs Group. So in this current role, I really have the privilege of working with national partner organizations like FJMC, but also with our national synagogue network, which is called Kulanu, Synagogues in Action Against Anti-Semitism. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it when we have a chance, but Kulanu means all of us in Hebrew. And it's grown into a really incredible network of congregations that work with ADL experts and resources, but also with one another to fight anti-Semitism. So I think I gave you quite a mouthful there. I'll turn it back over to you, Irv.
Thank you so much, and thank you for working through your little cough. And I'm glad that very happy that you've joined us. That's very great as an introduction, and you all certainly do more. And we're all aware of the research and all the reports that you've all done. It's fantastic. But a question we would have is, how have you become, or how have you evolved into a trusted organization that gathers and analyzes data on hate? You have a wide range of those who trust you. How have you, over the years, been able to develop that?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think part of it is that we have been doing this work for so long. As I mentioned, we are founded in 1913, and we've been working toward the same mission since then. So we take a whole of society approach to this work. And as you might know, ADL is a 501c3, so we're a nonpartisan organization. We have a history of calling out hate both on the left and on the right. The centers that I just talked about a little bit and described, they put out, as Irv mentioned, several annual reports. They cover topics like campus anti-Semitism, online hate and harassment, murder and extremism, anti-Semitic attitudes, and of course, also our annual audit of anti-Semitic incidents. We've been collecting data on anti-Semitic incidents for over 40 years. Our data is used by members of Congress, Jewish communal partners, universities, by the media, helping to inform policies that impact communities locally and nationally. As an aside, really, when you think about that audit of anti-Semitic incidents, it underscores the fact that it's so important to report incidents when they happen. So data informs our advocacy work, as well as the decisions that are made at local and national levels. And we only know about incidents when they're reported to us. So if you are the target of an anti-Semitic incident, or if you witness an anti-Semitic incident, or any sort of incident of bias for that matter, I really urge you to report it to us. And you can do that through our website. There's also a joint ADL and USCJ reporting form that I can share. I'll share the link at the end.
That would be terrific.
We also, I'll just tell you a little bit more about our audit and kind of why we are a trusted source for that data. We review every single incident that's reported to us, and we investigate and confirm that the facts that are reported, depending on the incident and with the permission of the party who reports to us, we often follow up with schools, with law enforcement or other entities, depending on the incident that happens. And if incidents are reported to us more than once, like for example, a school incident, we might hear from multiple parents, we might hear from administrators or teachers, we only count it toward the audit one time, even regardless of how many times it's reported to us. So we're very, very careful with that data. We really look at it very, very methodically. In 2023, we recorded over 8,800 anti-Semitic incidents. And right now, our Center on Extremism and our regional teams are in the process of reviewing the 2024 data. So I'll urge you to keep an eye out for that 2024 audit of anti-Semitic incidents, because I know that advocacy is such an important part of the work that so many of you do. Our incident data is really sliced and diced and categorized in a way that's very impactful when you're advocating to make changes in your communities.
Very, very important. How does ADL partner with non-Jewish organizations to combat hate?
You know, this was a focus of a Kulanu webinar that we held in January. We hosted leaders from a few different organizations to talk about their specifically interfaith partnerships. And I'll be really honest, many of the congregations in our Kulanu network have found interfaith partnership work to be particularly challenging since October 7th. But we're not backing away from this work. And if anything, I think it's become more important than ever to find common ground with other organizations. So we recommend doing just that, focusing on the issues on which you agree and accepting the fact that you might not agree on every single issue. You know, in the months since October 7th, we've felt the support of many evangelical groups. And as an organization, we don't agree with them on every issue, but we really don't let that get in the way of working together on what are our shared priorities. So as I mentioned, we held this Kulanu webinar, and after the webinar, we heard from so many congregations who wanted to really dig deeper into the challenges of this interfaith work. And also some who have had great success with it. So we offered to our network a follow-up session where we call it a community of practice. And we brought Kulanu participants together for a really lively discussion. So we had people talking about all sorts of different community programs that they're doing, interfaith seders, book studies, movie groups. And one thing that really stood out to me was the importance of going back to the basics. So, a couple of participants talked about bringing people together to volunteer, to clean up a park or serve meals, to really do work together that was unrelated to religion, to politics, or to any other hot button issues. Just getting together and working side by side, giving back to the community brought some of those interfaith groups together. And I think through these sort of feel good experiences, we can build a foundation of trust that will serve the more difficult work that we hope to do together.
I appreciate that, and I share your hope and aspirations for that. But I can also pass on in my community here in Fairfax, Virginia, but elsewhere from our club members, that it has been sometimes, how does one say it, quiet, maybe crickets out there. And our rabbi at our synagogue in Fairfax, who himself had been head of the Interfaith Clergy Council, has been disappointed over the last couple of years at how little his fellow clergy have responded. But he keeps trying, and we all wish we could do more. And obviously, you've had success, as you've stated.
Yeah, and challenges too. I've certainly heard a lot of challenges. That's what brought so many people into the webinar and the follow-up kind of convening afterward. But we have heard about successes and we've had some of our own. So I would say keep at it, keep doing what you're doing and take those wins as small as they might be.
I appreciate that. The past 17 months have been acutely difficult for the Jewish community. Um, how has ADL staff managed its goals? The stress and the tragedies befallen on so many Jews. You have so many good people. We know the Washington regional office here, but that is a lot for your workforce, your staff to have to do. How have they managed this stress and all this untold tragedies?
Tell you what, I can only speak for one person, and that's myself. And I would say what I do is really just take it a day at a time. I have found myself leaning into opportunities to experience Jewish joy. I'll tell you, I had the pleasure about a week and a half ago to attend BBYO's international conference in Denver, and they brought together over 4,000 teens and roughly 1,000 adults, I think, from around the world. And every opportunity that I get to interact with young people, I walk away impressed and optimistic about our future. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I did at the conference. I facilitated an ADL Words to Action workshop with teens from BBYO's international cohort. There were kids there from Mexico, Germany, South Africa, Argentina, Israel, from all over the world. And in this workshop, they talked about their personal experiences with anti-Semitism. Our Words to Action workshops are based in um, Jewish identity. So the kids have an opportunity to talk about their own identity and talk about their experiences. And they really mentioned some extremely difficult experiences that they've had with anti-Semitism in school, in sports, across the board. But they walked away from the session talking about how they plan to respond to anti-Semitism and how they might respond if somebody makes an anti-Semitic joke or a comment that invokes an anti-Semitic trope. So I found it really powerful and really uplifting to see these young people gain the confidence to stand up to anti-Semitism in their own lives. We know that as a people, Jews have faced hard times throughout history, but we've also persevered. So we can look to our past and to our future for real inspiration.
That is it is terrific. You share with us various strategies, and we've seen that in the content we've seen from ADL, the different strategies to interrupt anti-Semitism in everyday conversation. You give the issue of to speak up, circle back, explain the impact, ask questions, connect to a historical context. Are you able to assess how successful this has been? Can every day of us in the community be able to use that? And do you get back feedback from our community how effective this strategy has been for them to engage in such everyday conversation?
Yeah, I think, these are strategies that we have been teaching for many, many years, and we have found them to be effective, and we've heard from others who have found them to be effective. Now, let me be really clear. I think it's important to certainly have situational awareness, to know your audience. Sometimes when you're using one of those strategies, you might just interrupt and come back to it privately if it's in a group. It all depends on your audience and the environment that you're in. But the five strategies that Irv mentioned are part of kind of a handout that we have shared with FJMC and with USCJ, that Irv can share with all of you. I think it was part of the invitation for this webinar. And, we can go into any of them a little bit more deeply. But one thing that's really helpful is having opportunities to practice those conversations. So you can get together in a group like this, or probably really more effectively a smaller group, and talk about some of the situations that you've encountered and how you might respond. And when we're doing words to action, often we'll take time to introduce a scenario and to kind of role play how we might use any of those strategies in real time. And I find it to be very helpful to do that rehearsing, where you actually play it out and kind of get comfortable with the strategy.
And I think we'll have a little bit of this more further insight on this at our convention, when your colleague will be speaking on Advocacy 101, which for everybody, again, this is at our Chicago convention. This is going to be part of the Geffen Institute, as I showed on my slides earlier. ADL will be having essentially Advocacy 101 to talk about these strategies and how we in the community can do that. So if you're interested in what Emily has said, please, we hope that we'll see you in Chicago as well. If I may, on some of the current events of the day, and certainly we've gotten to where when we hear Jonathan Greenblatt talking, that means something has occurred. We probably all have seen it, and then we wait to see where and how he and ADL may be. So, and if you may not want to respond fully, we understand that, but there have been certain indications by some of the people in the new administration, certain visuals that have made us uncomfortable. We have someone who is asking a question about when you've seen Elon Musk do that salute thing at some conference and Steve Bannon. We don't want to say we don't know what's in their mind, why they're doing it, but as ADL, what does ADL see when it sees someone like that together with the content of the discussion? Is that something we should be worried about? How does ADL view something like that?
Well, Irv, as I'm sure you know, ADL did make a statement on that, and I, when you ask if I can speak for ADL on that, the ADL already did put out a statement, certainly on Musk's, and then I believe it was yesterday on Steve Bannon. So you can see the statements that we put out. As you know, we're committed to working with both the left and the right. We're a nonpartisan organization. ADL analyzed the gesture in the context of the full speech and came to that conclusion. I will say that you know, it's no shock to say that it upset some people, that other people interpreted it differently. Um, when we're looking at incidents in general, something that we typically think about is the impact versus the intent. And so that is something that we generally consider when we're looking at an incident.
Yeah, it's very disturbing to see that for all of us, and certainly for so many of us who are either survivors from the Holocaust or second generation survivors, 2Gs, which is what I am. To see that in this country, considering what happened to my parents, though they did survive, it's very disturbing to see that some 80 years after my parents, who were in different camps at the time, were liberated. And if they were with us today, they would certainly ask, how could this be in a country that we came to? Could it be there? But I appreciate your sharing that. We have
Did
another
it
question.
didn't ADL say that it was not a Nazi or a Roman salute?
Yes, they said it was not that. That is correct what they said. So in fairness, that's what they said, and um appreciate that comment. If we have another question, about what percent of the incidents that are reported to ADL, excuse me, are referred to law enforcement? And of these, are you aware of what percent result in convictions?
I don't know the exact percentages, either of the incident, either part of the question. I will tell you that every incident that we record does not rise to the level of a crime. So when you hear about the FBI's data or local law enforcement data, they're reporting hate crimes or bias-based crimes. We're reporting incidents. So it doesn't have to rise to the level of a crime for it to be considered an incident. If there is a criminal element, then we do share information with law enforcement.
And are there statistics ADL has on how many of those actually are criminal and are convicted?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I saw another question in the chat asking about a specific organization. I have not personally worked with that org, but I'd be happy to check and see if anybody else at ADL has a relationship with them. I'm not familiar with the organization that
Yeah,
was.
yep, neither am I. And all we know is one of our members attended some Zoom sessions of theirs. Another area that we'll be talking about the convention, but I think it's an area that you focus in as well, is Gen Z. Those young people who were born between 1997 and 2012. They would be anywhere from middle school through a few years after graduating from college. And we had interviewed earlier last year the author, Dr. Samantha Vinokur-Meinrath, who looked at them, and her essentially point was Gen Z, for all their life, has experienced nothing but physical and emotional insecurities. They were born the year after Columbine, and as growing up, it became routine for them to practice how to evacuate and stay safe at schools. Two, social media threats and other kinds of bullying and anti-Semitism. So is it fair to say that given all those insecurities, it is very challenging for us to be able to help Gen Z, because for them, is anti-Semitism just one of many different physical insecurities? Do we blame them that if they don't make anti-Semitism the worst or the most one? What would you say on that, Emily?
Well, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure if you know this, Irv. I think you do. I'm a former educator myself. I taught elementary school for many years. And I am familiar with the audience. I am not an expert in the research in this area. I know that our Center on Anti-Semitism Research has looked at differences in anti-Semitic attitudes of the various generations, but I don't know that we've identified the reasons or the underlying reasons that those attitudes are manifesting, or really more about what you asked, related to the level of importance that they associate with anti-Semitism. So
Yeah.
it's something that I could certainly pass on to our Center for Anti-Semitism Research and see if they might want to take a look into it.
I think that would be great, and we'll be talking about it in Chicago. But Dr. Vinica Meinroth is an expert in this. She wrote a book, Gen Z. Oh no, sorry, hashtag anti-Semitism coming of age during the resurgence of hate. So we have a question that Barry wants to ask. Barry, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Irv. As a follow-up to my question on incidents reported to law enforcement, I think that ADL does a great job in tracking frequency of anti-Semitic incidents, but I think the frequency alone doesn't necessarily reflect the severity of the instances that we've been encountering across the country. For example, I live in a primarily Orthodox neighborhood here in Chicago, and we had an Orthodox gentleman shot a couple of months ago just walking to shul, because our Orthodox neighbors are clearly identifiable just by their clothes and wearing a tallis when they walk to shul. There's also an organization here in Chicago that I'm sure you're familiar with, called Secure Community Network, and they help Jewish organizations. It's a federation organization. They help Jewish organizations, including synagogues across the country, secure their synagogues. I mean, we've been victims in Pittsburgh and other places around the country of synagogue shootings and whatnot. And I would think, and I would urge, that ADL report criminal acts that they encounter as a separate category, so we can track the increase or decrease, hopefully, eventually, in those instances. Because the numbers themselves, while they reflect an increase, there's a big difference between somebody that engages in some anti-Semitic verbal abuse someplace versus a shooting that's a severe hate crime. Just my thoughts.
No, I agree with you. And while we don't necessarily have a category labeled criminal incident, you'll see there are assaults, vandalism, and other various categories that are pretty descriptive.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look through the annual report again and see how those categories break out. Thank you. Oh, also, I just one other thing, or I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But here in Chicago, our Chicago Police Department now is required to have a separate category. You know, crimes obviously are reported to the police. They have a separate category now for hate crimes that they never had before. And the state of Illinois, similar to ADL, has started their own website where people can report hate crimes to the state of Illinois, because the incidence here in Illinois has increased so much. So I just thought I would throw that out there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we have done a tremendous amount of advocacy work around hate crimes. We actually developed in the 1980s a model statute that became the basis for today's hate crime laws. And 46 states and the District of Columbia have enacted hate crime laws, many of which are based on or similar to ADL's model. I know here in Michigan, we just worked alongside our state representatives to enhance the hate crime protections, and that just recently passed and was signed by our governor. So that's a really important part of the advocacy work that we do here.
Thank you. Bob Olish, you have a question?
Yeah, regarding Barry's comment regarding the secure network, I think the current Trump administration has put a hold on the grants for houses of worship. But I did receive a petition from the ADL yesterday to resist that.
Yeah, so I think what you're probably referring to is like an action alert that allowed you to click and send a letter or a plea to your representatives or to the government, telling them how important the Nonprofit Security Grant Act, Nonprofit Security Grant funding really is to our community. I've done lobbying with ADL a number of times, both on Capitol Hill and locally here in Michigan, around nonprofit security grants. They provide funding to increase security measures at not only synagogues, but other houses of worship and religious schools and other targeted nonprofits. So we did put out an action alert, and that's something else that I can let you know about. I'll put in the chat a link to see the various actions that you can take with ADL. So I did see someone put a question in the chat about how we can enhance our partnership. What can we do for each other? I mean, one of the things that I think you can do, and Irv and I have talked about this a number of times, is take part in some of the actions that we do, share them with your communities, and I'll send a link now to our advocacy opportunities. And I think that nonprofit security grant action is right up at the top.
And while Emily is doing that, let me also indicate that all of you, I hope, notice the FJMC toolkit that comes out every couple of weeks or so. And in that, when we see one of these action alerts, not all of them, we don't have room for all of them, we will engage in that and pass that on. So I hope you all are able to just look at the FJMC toolkit and consider it, and then take action in terms of that. And you can see where Emily has posted in there the site as well. But whenever we can, through that toolkit, we will send it on to, excuse me, all of our members in North America. So please be on the lookout for them. The gentleman who asked that question about FJMC is our past international president, Tom Sudo, and he has raised his hand. So I think he may respond to Emily in terms of things that we can do to partner with each other. Tom, go right ahead.
Tom, you're on mute.
6 years of being on Zoom, you could think I'd learn how to unmute by now. Or I think it's all my friends who mute me so I won't say anything. So I got two questions. One is we have a network of over 14,000 members. We impact hundreds of thousands, 100,000 or more people through the congregations that we're in. So we'd love to be able to figure out ways that we can work strongly with ADL. Part of that is I read an article this morning, I think it was either in the Forward or one of the other news magazines, that the number of people searching the name Rabbi Meir Kahana is now reaching almost record proportions. I'm concerned that we're going to see a time when some people are going to take the law into their own hands. There are Nazis who I'm in Ohio. There's been several Nazi marches in Ohio. In the 70s, there were Nazi marches in Illinois that turned into violent confrontations. I know that I think it was Beitar, one of the other more right-wing groups criticized ADL in the last 48 hours or so. What can we do to keep this under control and not, go out and harm it? How do we do this unified? And I think ADL has a very loud and good voice. How do we rally behind that?
I think that's a great question. And one of the ways that we can do that is by setting an example. When we put out statements, and that was, again, part of my job when I was in a regional office responding to local incidents, I think it's very important to gather information before we speak out on something when we might want to be very reactive. Gather information, make sure we know all the facts. Don't fall into that trap of spreading panic that I think is so prevalent on social media. And I think also just educating our community and really being a pillar for what is most important, representing our Jewish values. I think that's something that we can all do together.
Sure. Before we do leave tonight, what can you tell us about Never Is Now? What are some of the highlights that you expect? And again, remind everybody that there's a very nice discount offer that Emily had put in there for our group. So we hope we'll see some of you, at least in the greater metro area. But what can we expect at the conference?
Well, thanks, Irv. I would love to tell you a little bit about Never Is Now, as well as a couple other ADL programs. I think this also addresses Tom's question that you put in the chat initially, how we can work together. So I think there are a number of ways we can work together. I mentioned some of them already, but I'd love to tell you about a few others. As Irv mentioned, Never Is Now is the world's largest conference on fighting anti-Semitism. It's next week, Monday and Tuesday in New York at the Javits Center. I know not everyone is located in New York or able to make it there. We do have virtual sessions, and I'll put a link to register for those virtual sessions into the chat. It's free to register for the virtual sessions. And as Eric mentioned, we also do have a discount code for those who are joining us in person. We have a number of really incredible guests this year. One thing that I'm most excited for is our congregational networking session. So it's really been promoted only to our Kulanu network, but I would love to invite any of you who will be there to join us. And that session is Tuesday morning. It's kind of you grab breakfast and then come into the networking session room. You'll hear from an ADL senior leader, as well as some of my colleagues on the Jewish partnership team, and then also have an opportunity to talk to other congregations that are here to do this work of fighting anti-Semitism. So you've heard me say the word or name the network Kulanu a number of times tonight. I would love to really invite all of you to join our Kulanu network. Kulanu means all of us in Hebrew, and ADL's Kulanu network is a roughly 500 congregations. We represent a variety of movements, congregation sizes, and communities. It's absolutely free to join. There are no requirements. We know that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all congregation. So we offer different types of opportunities to engage, and each congregation can really decide just how involved they want to be. We do ask that you have the support of a member of your clergy. And we also have congregations that are members of the network that are lay-led. So there isn't official clergy for every congregation that's part of Kulanu. We host live webinars. You've heard me mention a couple of them tonight. They're geared toward a congregational community, both clergy, staff, and lay leaders. We also have a robust online portal that contains resources to develop programs for your own congregation. But I would say that the real strength of the Kulanu network is the ability to connect with other congregations, to troubleshoot together, to talk about challenges, talk about successes. We convene communities of practice, and these sessions, when you join these sessions, you can talk to other congregations all about the work that you're doing. We have had great feedback from congregations that are really learning from one another, and they connect both online and offline. So we offer all sorts of different opportunities to learn, innovate, advocate, and connect. It's really an amazing way to build on the work and the networking that you're already doing with FJMC. So, I talked about the Words to Action session that I facilitated for BBYO. Words to Action is something else that you can bring to your community. It's ADL's signature anti-Semitism education program for Jewish students in middle school and high school and in college. And it's rooted in the exploration of Jewish identity, but it also gives students skills to address anti-Semitism. So we offer both online and in-person Words to Action programs. And we also have free digital courses, both for students and for educators, as well as all sorts of resources for families. Some of you may be familiar with Not on My Campus. That's our campus hub that includes resources for college students and parents. So all sorts of different resources, programs, networks, and different ways to participate. So, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email address in the chat. If anybody needs more information about a specific program or about the network, I also want to include a link to learn more about Kulanu. There's a great video here on the Kulanu site where we recorded participants talking about their Kulanu experience. So one more link that I will share, how to sign up for ADL newsletters if you're interested. I think I shared the advocacy opportunities, and I will share also how to where to report an incident. So a bunch of different pieces here, and finally I'll add in there my my contact information. So thank you, Irv. I hope I answered everyone's questions, and I can certainly stick around for a few minutes if there are additional questions, but thank you all for being here, for the incredible work that you're doing. And thank you, Irv, for inviting me and for putting this together. Irv, you're on.
Sorry,
You're
sorry,
on.
sorry, sorry. Yeah, same mistake, same mistake. It's certainly a pleasure and honor to have you here, and we look forward to being at Never Is Now and enjoying all that success and using this partnership between FJMC and ADL that we can perhaps build more Kulanu and other programs. So we have one last quick question before we go. Mr. Watts, the real
Yeah.
Watts.
Thank you, Emily. I get all the newsletters, and I get the campus crisis alert too that I read every day because, looking out. Columbia is one of my alma maters, which has been a really troubled place. But and just today, I think Michigan came up. And are things getting better this year? I mean, I've heard that it's less widespread, but more violent, or more the protests.
Yeah, I will say that of the colleges and universities that were on our initial report card release, I don't know the exact percentage, but I know that many of those who had terrible grades, failing grades, have really leaned into working with ADL and have shown significant improvement. University of Michigan is one of my alma maters, and the current president, Santa Ono, will be at Never Is Now. If there are any other U of M grads, there's a U of M networking session. I believe it's Monday night, but the schedule is all on the Never Is Now website. If you're coming, or if you want to live stream any of the sessions, you can review the schedule. So Bob, I think probably what you're hearing, there's probably something to it. I know that from ADL's perspective, many, we haven't graded every college and university, but many of those that did receive a grade have improved, have shown significant improvement, and we're also expanding to include a whole bunch more. And so my hope is, and our hope is, that work will continue, that they'll continue to work with us to improve the ways that they respond to incidents on campus.
Thank you. I really appreciate your work and your coverage and reporting on this as well. I have one kid in grad school, one recently out of school, so still, it's an issue, and Irv is working on this a lot with local universities here. So, it's very important, this coverage. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Emily, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you next week in New York, and hopefully some of you may decide to go. And certainly we look forward to ADL's workshop at the Geffen Institute at the convention and July, over the 4th of July weekend. It'll be just great out there to be there. We thank you for all that, and we will, of course, be in touch since we're partners. Thank you, everybody, for making the time. Apologize if at the beginning we had some glitches, but I think it worked out just beautifully, just marvelously, as they may say. And thank you so much for the hour, Emily, and that hopefully your voice can now rest. We thank you much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you all for being
And
here.
Irv,
Thanks for having
Irv, I
me.
want to thank you on behalf of the FJMC. You've led their anti-Semitism committee for the last couple of years. You work with a small group of us who work in Israel and anti-Semitism to coordinate our work. Webinars like this is what Irv has put on. He's created these great partnerships with ADL and others and grown them, and we owe you a debt of gratitude. And we thank you for what you bring to the organization.
Thank you so much. Very gracious of you to say that. And Emily's recording, as along with all of our other webinars, you will find on the FJMC website. Thanks, Mr. Watts. And it's under the page, the Anti-Semitism Committee page. So we collect all these so that others who may not have had a chance to participate live will be able to hear that. Thank you all very much. Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.
Good night, everybody.
Emily, from a Michigan perspective, I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
I've learned that one of the stars of the Michigan basketball team is Jewish, and he also has Israeli citizenship. Has anything been directed against him?
I don't know. Since I left my role in the Michigan office,
Yeah.
I'm not quite as, I no longer hear about every single incident if it's not in the media, so I can't speak to that. I actually heard that 2 of the Michigan basketball stars are Jewish.
He transferred from Yale this year. Wolf, I think is his name, but a couple of years ago he made Aliyah so he could play on the Israeli national team and has played on the Israeli national team. So he's visible in what he does.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if there's. I just read a big article about him this morning. If there's anything that's if anybody's targeted him, I think it's hard to target somebody who's 7 feet tall and lifts weights. I mean, that's a smart thing to do, but
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's been a target.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Emily, again. Have a lovely rest of the evening, everybody. Thank you.
Irv, thank you very much.
Good night. Thanks, sir.
Pleasure.
Good night. And Emily, thank you.